Hi everyone, it's Veda here from New Zealand with Seth, and this is the Integrative Science of Water and Consciousness podcast. And we've got a really exciting topic, which I think is extremely important to talk about, which is about a type of water that many people have never heard of before, and that's called primary water. So I'm going to be really leaving it up to Seth to fill us in just a little bit more, or a lot more, about this extremely special type of water, which I think could be a huge solution to so many problems that are happening in the world as far as drinking water shortage goes. Seth.
Yes. Well, thank you, Veda. You're absolutely right. When it comes to the dire global circumstances surrounding water and then seeking like what the solutions could be, primary water comes in at probably the top of it because for a lot of reasons. One, a small groups of dedicated people know about this and have proven that it's a possibility and something that works, and science has also proven it. So everything has caught up to where this is now a known potential for global dire water shortages and dirty water. Like it is a viable solution for all of this, but it's something that hardly anybody knows of. Like you said, I mean, people, I never even heard of it. The only reason I discovered it was by chance, and that's because of tourmaline spring. We
Mm-hmm.
couldn't figure out, and I think we talked about this in one of the episodes, but we couldn't figure out what the nature of this source was. Nobody could figure it out. There was lots of theories. We talked to water chemists, we talked to hydrogeologists who probably watch this podcast now,
Mm.
but at the time, nobody could figure out where it was coming from until one of the water chemists that we know and loves us, a guy named John Dyer, because we try to crack the code, like, where is this water coming from? He was the one that finally suggested it's primary water. And I was like, what's that? And then he went on to say, well, like, since high school science and chemistry class, we're taught that all the water that exists on the face of the earth actually comes from outer space, in that comets, asteroids, meteorite fragments, things of that nature have been crashing into the earth with ice on them or moisture as they dissipate into the atmosphere, creating, over 4 billion years since the earth supposedly was formed, and providing that liquid nourishment into the ionosphere that then trickles into the atmosphere. And 4 billion years later, we've got these massive oceans that so we're told that that's where all the water on earth comes from, that all the water that exists on earth is all there is, and that it's constantly being recycled through the water cycle processes. Like, it comes off the ocean as vapor, it turns into clouds, and it rains into the mountains. Then that trickles down through the mountains into springs, streams. Huh?
Oh, you froze for a short
Oh,
time
no,
there for
okay.
me.
Well,
Sorry.
good. At least I didn't vaporize. If it's frozen, maybe we can get some water crystal pictures of it. Sorry,
Yeah.
trying to be funny. So the bottom line is, we've had this very kind of archaic, scarcity-driven collective view of water, in that all the water that exists on the planet is all that there is. And it's kind of like, you like take good care of it or suffer the consequences. But what has actually been discovered, which is so enlightening and so incredible, and is actually something that was discovered quite a long time ago and has since been verified and re-verified by science. In fact, I wish I knew the guy's name. Paul Power is going to smack me for not knowing, but there was a
You can
book.
leave it in a link.
Yeah, I'll put it all in the link. But and if you go to the primarywaterinstitute.org, you can look at all this stuff too. But there was a book written, his name's at the tip of my tongue, but a book was written in the 60s. It's New Water for a Thirsty World, I think is what it was called. And this is basically who Paul Power learned with, these people learned with, that essentially proved and demonstrated that the concept of primary water, which is that water didn't just come from space. What's more likely is that it was created by the Earth because there's so much of it. And what science has since verified is that indeed most of the water that exists on the face of this planet has come about by magmatic processes inside of the Earth that literally, just as it creates rare earth metals and minerals and things of that nature, the same magmatic processes that create those also create water. And that when this water is created, it binds to a layer of rock inside of the Earth's, not the I'm not sure of the exact layer where it is. It's below the crust, but there's a
Is it in the
layer.
mantle?
Well, the rock that it binds into is called ringwoodite.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure where it, it's under the crust, obviously, but this water binds to this layer of rock. Then when it pressurizes, and enough of it forms, it seeks outlet. It wants to find a way to release. And so it will sometimes surface as springs, as, oases in the desert. I mean, it essentially surfaces as springs everywhere. But like an oasis is a perfect example of primary water. There's in Peru there's one. It's in the middle of nowhere. There's no water cycle. There's no, orographic lifting of water coming off the ocean going to the mountains. It's a desert. But how's this water there? Well, we don't know.
Can I ask you a couple of questions
Yes.
really quickly? So perhaps there is, and I think there probably is, a combination of water that's come out of, from out of space. But I also think that the idea is really intriguing to me, that water is stored within the earth. And my question is it that it has, are the hydrogen and oxygen molecules separate and somehow come together within this ringwoodite? How does the water actually begin, and how much is there? And we're trying to keep this podcast a little short. How do we access it, and can it be accessed, anywhere around the world, or is there a technique like?
Love it. Great questions. Let's break it down one by one here and make it more simple. One, I can't personally explain the chemistry behind this question, but there's lots of brilliant minds that are hopefully watching this podcast who can. But essentially, yes, I mean, when you think about it, the earth creates tons of super complex minerals and, different elements. Creating hydrogen and oxygen and binding them together should be a relatively simple one, right? So the
Mhm.
exact chemistry behind that, I don't know, but somebody could explain it. But that's it, essentially, is oxygen and hydrogen are finding a way to come together and bind, which, boom, there's water. And I would imagine, because it's magmatic in origin, that it's vapor. It's starting as a gas, I would think, before
So
it turns.
but it's trapped in ringwoodite, right? So it's trapped inside a kind of mineral crystal.
Yeah, so ringwoodite it's like a layer of earth, right? It's a specific type of layer of earth, but I would say it's created from a vaporous thing. Then as it's created and it goes into the levels, the different surfaces of the earth, it probably starts to gather and congeal and form into more what the water that we know and love in its fluid state. And as it forms in that, it holds, it gathers essentially, and then through like tectonic plates or cracks in the Earth's crust, all these different layers and things, that's what it seeks outlet through.
Right.
So, what
It's
was the second
interesting that it's
question?
that it wants to come upwards, very much like it's been, like, how water is drawn up through trees. It's like forces. The pressure is like actually forcing it up and out. It's interesting.
That's a brilliant concept. That's true. Tying it into trees like that, I never thought of that. But yeah. So, what they're saying, if you look up in the scientific journals and a lot of places that are openly covering this now, they're estimating that there's roughly 3 to 4 times, and correct me if I'm wrong, anybody watching this, 3 to 4 times the amount of water that's on the surface of the planet is gathered inside of the planet.
I've read that. I've,
Yeah.
I've read that just a couple of years ago. It said that, yeah, it's like, it's huge volume of water. So, yeah, fascinating.
So geniuses like Paul Power, okay, who's the, I don't know what his position is, but he's the founder of the Primary Water Institute. He and others, but he's definitely one of the major pioneers, kind of leading the charge. And he learned with Stephen something, I can't, but who wrote that book. Paul has demonstrated that you can go out in the world, and when you know geology and you study certain layers of rock and where plutons and different layers come together, he can find this water and drill into the earth, okay, with a pretty small non-invasive drill that goes deep, and he's got a 90 something percent success rate of, and he's done this, I don't know how many countries, but the records are phenomenal what he's done.
Right.
He's gone into places where they don't have access to pure potable or even clean or relatively clean water. He has
Mhm.
drilled in, yes, go ahead.
And this water's drinkable?
So far, it's potable. When it comes out of the ground, it is potable. Now, depending on what layers it goes through and what it can be exposed to along the way could, make it so that it's not potable. But,
Mm.
he told me the example in Africa, I think Kenya is one of the places that he more recently drilled in. And before he went and did this, people were getting their water out of these swamps essentially that were primary in origin, he felt, but animals, everybody goes there just so they defecate and urinate in it, and everybody and all the animals are all getting their water out of these same kind of areas, and so the water is just becoming, horrible stories like people walk for miles with water on their head and get killed by lions. I mean, hardcore. He went in there, drilled into a place, found the water. They tried to drill in other areas, not him, but other people, and they couldn't find it, and they drilled really deep. He drilled a not a very deep hole in an area that none of them did and got water coming out of it. Then they set up a solar pump so that the water could come out of there. And now this whole village and whole area has pure potable water. And he has done this in many different countries. He claims that he could do it on small islands in the middle of the ocean. I
Wow.
mean, according to him and others, many others actually, now this water is available almost anywhere. You just have to know where to drill, where to look for it.
I would be so interested to actually interview him and ask him a ton of questions because I only have just found out about primary water a couple of years ago when you mentioned it to me actually, and I read through some of the literature, and what I am consistently hearing and seeing statistically is that because of all the raping and pillaging that's going on with so many big brand companies that are just taking so much drinking water from springs, the springs and the aquifers are starting to just dry up. And there's such a small percentage of actual drinking water on this planet compared to seawater. If we're not careful, and when I don't know that we are particularly being that careful. It is, of course, water is a necessity. It's a necessity for life, but it is just the way in which we're treating it, the way in which we are bottling, the way in which we're doing everything on such mass. It would be so nice, I think, if people with springs could do some kind of community tap, where people can come and they can collect their own water. If you actually have to drive somewhere or walk somewhere to and then fill your bottles of water for your week, you're going to really see it in a slightly new way when you actually have to go out and get it. And there's a process involved rather than just conveniently picking it up from, from anywhere. I actually had a question for you about Tourmaline Spring, and I don't know if I want to spring this on you because I actually don't know the answer. But if someone wanted to, would they be allowed to come to the spring and fill? Or
So
do you just simply do?
unfortunately, we've had to stop doing that.
Yeah.
They used to, like we used
Yeah.
to allow tours up there, but we stopped for a whole bunch of different reasons. One, we're completely understaffed. Like we just don't have the time to be able to do it.
Yeah.
Two, there's sadly, and even saying this publicly is kind of strange, but I'll just say it anyway. There's been people trespassing who work for other companies that maybe
What?
necessarily
Really?
aren't happy about this particular operation. So a combination of a lot of different things like that have made it so that sadly we just can't, we can't. Now, there
Yeah.
used to be a 55-room hotel up there where people would come to participate in balneotherapy, to take to the waters and drink to the water. The plan was like, let's make this work, and then we'll open up the hotel and we'll do all that with, the proper security. Because if a competitive source or somebody who's not happy about the spring wants to come and put something in it, or, like,
Right.
sadly, those are real possibilities. So,
I
um,
had no idea. That's shocking to me. But I can totally understand. But
competitive.
anyway, we're digressing because I really want to get back to the
Yeah.
primary water aspect. That
Well, let me tell. Okay, I'll just say this one thing too, just so everybody listening, like the bigger vision of Tourmaline Spring was because it's a perfect drinking water, but to sell the water to those who can afford it and want it because they recognize the value of it. And then our goal is to use the money that we made from creating a successful business model to fund the Primary Water Institute, who then can go over and drill water starting in places where they don't have clean water, which sadly is most of the world, and then from there scale it out. Like that was, and it still is the plan, but
I
Tourmaline
love.
Spring is like we've got 3 people who work there. It's a tiny operation.
I totally understand that and respect that. But I also love that idea, that initiative of like being able to actually filter money through into supporting such an amazing cause.
Yeah.
As I think that is there enough? Is there enough of this primary water in the world to be able to give drinking water to the people that really need it, especially in areas of India and Africa, where there is such a lot of water shortage.
Yeah. According to Paul Power, according to the people who do the studies, there's way more than enough. Now,
Yeah,
I would imagine there needs to be some kind of wisdom discernment in
yeah,
reference to it, which, like you said, right now we're not doing a very good job as it is. But were things to change, were world leaders to become more empathetic, to their own people and to people of the world, were they to have more compassion, more love, more empathy, more care, then, it the great thing is it actually doesn't take too much. The solutions to every problem that we are facing right now as a species are actually way more simple than most of us think. The challenging part, the complicated part, is getting world leaders out of this self-oriented and competitive state with other countries to get into their heart and create these proper infrastructures. So
mm.
it could be done. And that's why, yes, Paul Power, if you're watching this and listening, please come on here. We want to have you on the show. I mean, we could do many episodes of it because, again, my vision was because Tourmaline Spring, there's only a small amount of water that just comes out of that spring, and that's it. So when that amount comes out, no more is coming because they don't.
Is it 100% primary water? Is tourmaline spring? Because man, I would really say that if and I'm pretty sure you've said that it is.
So according to my conversations with John Dyer,
Hmm.
He's concluded that it's roughly about 80% primary water and 20% secondary water, but it's secondary water that has actually passed through the hydrologic cycle,
Wow.
and that has gone into these deep layers of earth since way before the time of pollutants and all these man-made, you know, radioactive isotopes from nuclear bomb detonation, all the chemicals that have been created just as a result of the last 300 years. None of that stuff is there. It's not in it. So it's secondary water that is old, really old, probably 10,000 years old, they say.
So, but essentially, Tourmaline Spring is a really unique water in that it's primarily primary water.
Yes.
So it is a completely unique, different type of water that is essentially has kind of skipped the recycling process that is out in the world that we know it, and it's been in the womb of Mother Earth, and so it is literally a very unique primordial water. And that piques my curiosity as far as, well, how does that taste? What is its total dissolved solid count? Is it?
Yeah.
I would imagine it would be less.
Yeah.
You know, what are the kind of unique characteristics of a water that's come from a primary source?
Let me say something first. And I'm going to plug this really quick because I want any philanthropic minded billionaires or multi-millionaires who want to create a sustainable business model that truly brings water to a thirsty world, contact us. Contact me.
Oh, yeah.
Contact Veda. Like, if you're watching this, come forward. Let's put all this out on paper and let's start doing this. Let's create small businesses that are ethical, that are sustainable, that are in alignment with nature, and then start bringing water to places that don't have it. Because this could happen way quicker than most think. We just got to get some people who have the means to do so, opening their hearts and opening their wallets to a cause like this. And it could be done very, very immediately. But to answer your question, it's again, this is a super fascinating topic, and it's one that I only have minimal knowledge of. Like, one thing that we know is there's no radioactive isotopes, human made or man made. The other thing is that the water seems to have these properties that are so unique that there's no really models around the world to compare them to, because according to Paul Power and John Dyer, like, at one point this primary water is as simple as can be for the most part, but as it is pressurized and being pushed up through different layers of rock, it's going to be imbued, or it's going to take on the properties of whatever rock it is exposed to along the way. Now, if that's going through arsenic or lots of heavy metals or things of that nature, then I would imagine that the water is going to reflect that. But there's all kinds of other things that almost like defy the laws of physics. Just as water goes up through a tree, seemingly defying the laws of physics, so too does it go up through the earth. And it's not just pressure, but it's pressure that's going through it. But as it's going on, there's a refinement process as it goes through all these different layers of earth, in addition to this crazy natural ionic treatment that the earth and the different layers of bedrock and the different minerals are going to imprint the water to, or affect the water or subject it to. So we're talking about something really complex, really fascinating, and just, you know, amazing.
So is it naturally like more of a neutral alkalinity? Has it high in minerals and salts generally, or not so much as it's gone through a lot of filtration?
Low in minerals, really, really low in
Is
minerals.
that a standard across the board kind of characteristic?
According to Paul Power and John Dyer, yes. Like, that's
Hmm.
what and Paul Power, he's studied enough of these sources. That's the one thing they happen to notice is when that TDS is basically, I think, between 50 and 125
Okay.
is,
Pretty low.
and that's total dissolved solids for anybody not listening. It means it's basically the parts per, no, I'm not, parts per quadrillion, the amount of minerals or solids that are dissolved. And excuse me if I'm wrong in the parts, but it's basically the amount of minerals in water, to simplify it.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yes, no, it's, I know, it's like
Yeah, I
hard
mean,
to,
but yeah, so my 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 interest in this is is really for on a much bigger scale. So from what you're saying, from what from what the little I've read, I'm not an expert in this area. I would really like to learn a lot more. Is that there really is going to be, if the projections are right, water, unfortunately, is going to be seen as more valuable than oil. You can't live on oil. We don't really need it, not in the way that we use it. And so water we do need. We absolutely need it. We don't need to drive a car, but we do need to drink water. So what happens if, all of this water starts to dry up? What happens if that is to happen? And if there is, in fact, and it certainly seems that there is, another source of water that's just underneath the Earth's crust, then, and that it's drinkable, and that someone has the technology, the ability to be able to know where to drill to find this, and that there is exceedingly huge amounts of it. I've also read that it exceeds the amount of water that's actually on the surface of the Earth, that's within the Earth. So if that's true, then that's definitely more than enough than we need for people that just don't have access to clean water, and don't. I mean, what about costs and things like that? Because there's lots of desalination programs going on. There's all different types of ways of trying to get water to people. But if you could actually go into a desert and drill consciously, like the last thing you need to do is like, oh, let's just use up all the water we have
yeah,
on the earth as much as we can, and because we've got this other resource, and let's just use that all up, because that's kind of a lot of what we've done, is like just raped and pillaged and raped
yeah,
and pillaged.
rape
We need to
culture,
start to
rape culture,
honor
yeah.
these sources. But if it's possible, and then they don't need to have, there's not a lot of processing even going on. They're able to get water right to them. This can save so many lives.
Yeah.
This can change so many people, give dignity to so many people, because water does that on multiple levels. I think it was Gandhi, and he said something like, there is enough for everyone in the world, but not for everyone's greed.
Yes.
And I really feel that this is a wonderful example of us as human beings taking a little stock take, going, okay, firstly, let's honor what we do have. Let's start taking a back pedal here and go, okay, let's really look at what we do have here and how we can maintain what we have, and then also look at these primary water sources, because I'm amazed that it hasn't been more investigated. I'm surprised nobody's actually heard of it. This is a life-saving, life-changing reality,
Paul, I mean, first of all, it's not good for big business. So that's one reason. Second of all, Paul, I mean, I love this man so much. He goes, they're just ignorant. They just don't care. Like, just the idea of primary water is so in alignment with this podcast, with everything that you and I talk about and teach and help bring out in others, because it requires a shift in perception where that you somehow, through intensity or by your own volition, you wake up to recognize that the source to your own purity, to your own life, is something that you can become aware of by going inside, by perceiving inside of yourself. And consciousness is much like that. You know, when you are perceiving the world around you, you're not in your center. You're caught up in all these things around you. But when you're like, calm down, you start taking inventory of your own self, you relax, then you get into your center. There's a reason it's called being centered, because you're literally in your center. Your blood is in your center. It's not in your extremities when you're surviving and doing things. And you recognize that the source of your potency, of your creativity, is found inside of you. And you can become aware of that. This is the same concept, but in the earth, of the earth. And also for us to get out of our own greed and selfishness and to start perceiving that the earth is a living being that has internal processes just like us, that are more profound than us, that are more incredible than us, and that we are merely like bacteria on the back of this great nurturing mother that is providing life for all of us. So primary water requires this redefined perspective of self and reality, that when you do that, it makes you more heart-centric. It makes you recognize how amazing things actually are, how amazing nature is. And from that place, you act and conduct yourself more consciously, because you don't want to hurt anything, because you know it's a part of you. And if you love your own life and you cherish life, then you seek to do the same outside of you.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I tend to, I have a very emotional connection with water, as you know. And so for me, when I tap into the concept and the idea of water being available within the earth, and that it's actually able to be found, and possibly in it, like in your case, coming up through, these springs, bubbling up through springs. What it feels to me, from an emotional level, is that, our beautiful Mother Earth, is so loving, so kind. I'm a mum, and I know dads would say this too, but as a parent, you would do anything to make sure that your children are fed, that your children have enough to drink. Must be the hardest thing as a parent to watch your child die of starvation. My heart breaks imagining what people are going through in third worlds. And the idea that this Mother Earth would have this excess of this beautiful water that's being created, so that those people no longer have to see that and feel that. It's like that's the ultimate mother. The mother that is like, here, children, we have now, I have this to offer you to keep this life going in this planet. Just remember me, treat me well. That's all we ever ask, is just having that second thought, and mum, like a question, like, how are you doing, Mum? How was your day? They're like a big bonus sometimes, because we don't expect much as parents. Our children, we want them to be raised as good, beautiful, and we give them all our love. And it's such a selfless job.
Yeah.
But Mother Earth is just so selfless, just constantly giving and giving, and we just keep hurting her and hurting her. My suggestion that with the idea that this possibility is real, that she's offering us more life, more water, more sustenance from her within her womb, it is just so selfless. And I just think, God, if we are going to be able to access this and start being able to use this, let us do it right. Let us do it with love, for God's sake. What we've done to this planet is unacceptable, and we need to actually just stop it and start caring. And I went off on a whole tangent there, but that's what I
Much
do, and
needed.
I just get it.
Hallelujah. Hallelujah. It was a perfect it was like you finished what I started saying, and that needed to be said. And I think, in fact, what you said was so profound. I think probably let's stop it here
Yeah.
and keep
Okay.
and remind people, like, go back and listen to this again. Like, yeah, there was a lot of energy here. I was speaking in an intense way tonight, but and Veda started getting intense at the end. But that's because we want to change. It requires energy. You have to truly want change. And I talked about this in a personal video that I did recently too, about what it takes to change yourself. And in the beginning, it requires a lot. You have to make up your mind that you're going to change, and then you have to keep refocusing your attention into your heart so that you learn how to love. You have to train yourself to love. I mean, that's what it's come down to. But when you do, and you get into a habit of that, my gosh, you start feeling things and feeling new ways of relating to things that you didn't know you were capable of before. So, well, any closing words? And
I really think that what you just said is beautiful, and I think that there'll probably be a number of questions that might come with this podcast, and I encourage people to reach out, ask the questions. Hopefully, we can get the correct answers to you. Well, I think there's just such a huge opportunity to really see, look into this, delve
yeah,
into it more, see
yeah.
what can be done. I think it's a wonderful solution, and 100% natural.
Renewable,
So,
supposedly, too. It renews itself. It's a renewable resource. But again, it's like you said, it's almost like it needs to be done with this higher level of consciousness that has deep reverence and respect for the earth, for all of life. Otherwise, it's just going to be one more thing. Like, okay, great, it's a solution for a little while, but it's just another way for us to act like parasites and suck the life force out of this planet, which is what we've already been doing. So,
yeah, but if we keep doing it, there will be no life.
yes.
Honestly, if we just use up all of these aquas and the drinking water, it's going to end up being a place where only the people with water are going to have the wealth. It's like this distributes it around the world so that we don't have the hierarchy in that way, and that's what concerns me when I think of the future.
All right. If I'm gonna say a little closing prayer, unless you have anything else you want to add.
No, please do.
All right, and then before I say this prayer, to like this video, share it, get involved, comment below. Like, this is a global conversation that should be
Yeah.
being had. So, I'm gonna say a prayer. May each one of us, in our own way, come to a greater realization and recognition of how beautiful we each are individually, how loving each one of us has the potential to be on our own. And then from that place, let us come to that same realization from a collective level. Let others who know of their own greatness, of their own selfless capacity to love, come together on a greater scale to create greater connection. May those who have tremendous amounts of monetary wealth open their hearts and get involved in this. May the disequilibrium of balance that exists in this world become more equalized. May we as individuals and collectively as a species learn how to place value on the things that truly have value, that are priceless, and that no amount of money could ever buy, which is our consciousness, the energy that is animating our being, the relationships that we are capable of having with one another and with ourselves and with this earth and with the universe. These are the things that no amount of money can buy, and these are the things that provide immeasurable feelings of wholeness, of wellness, and goodness, and that are not just one and done. This is renewable and sustainable wholeness and connection with all of reality. So may we come together and create a better world from this place. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you, Seth, so much. Well, as we will wind this podcast up, thanks to everybody that has been watching. We love you. Please share it. And just the fact that you have watched all the way through to the end of this, means that you're really, you're part of our family here. We're all part of this beautiful water family. We're all bodies of water connecting somehow. So, I'm very, very grateful. Sending you all so much love and hugs and gratitude. Bye from me. Bye from Seth.
All right. Bye, you guys. Thank you so much. We love you.
Love you.
Till next time. Thank you for listening to the Integrative Science of Water and Consciousness podcast with Veda Austin and Seth Leaf Pruzansky. If you'd like to know more about Veda Austin, please go to vedaaustin.com. To learn more about Seth and Tourmaline Spring, go to tourmalinespring.com and I'mAwakeNowWhat.com. You'll also be able to find copies of this podcast and back issues at all of the websites we listed above. Thank you.